He's John Shipley, Jaguars beat reporter on Jaguars on SI. Covers the team, been covering them for a while now. John, thanks for hopping on Boston Center the chat. How you doing today, man?
Hey, appreciate you guys having me.
Hey, we know that the Patriots don't play the Jaguars until week 7 in London. We both can't wait for that early wake up. But ever since Mac Jones signed with Jacksonville in the offseason, these two franchises have been intertwined. Mac is the failed experience of a franchise quarterback for the Patriots. Now he's the backup for a franchise quarterback in Trevor Lawrence. But what have you seen from Mac so far in his short stint with the Jaguars? And what impressions has he made on you as a member of the media? And what have you heard from the team?
Yeah, no, he definitely seems like somebody who I think has kind of accepted his role on the roster and where he's kind of at this time in his career. You know, I've said that I think the Jaguars and Mac both viewed this season as kind of like the Mac Jones rehabilitation, project, trying to get, his career, his image, everything back on track. And I think he's, really settled into that. He's comfortable in the backup role. And, if you take, what the coaches say in press conferences, at 100% face value, which maybe you should, maybe you shouldn't. There was a legitimate competition between him and CJ Beathard, at the start of training camp for that backup job. And it just seemed like throughout all of training camp that Jones was pulling away from him. He's a lot different than Trevor Lawrence. He doesn't have like the athleticism or the ability to kind of improvise inside and outside the pocket, but he gets rid of the ball quick. He has good enough arm strength, good accuracy. It at least seems like they're comfortable if they ever have to head into a game with him that they're okay with it.
Yeah, that checks out. I mean, Mac was a top 25 pick for the Patriots because of his processing. This was a guy that was targeted by Kyle Shanahan coming into the draft because he loved his IQ, his accuracy, his ability to play within the system. Is his ceiling as high as Trevor Lawrence's? Absolutely not. But this is a guy right now, especially after what happened the last 2 years, can be a good backup quarterback for any franchise to have. But we also know that he signed with the Jaguars, and then Doug Peterson made waves, especially up here in Boston, saying that sometimes he sees Mac revert back to his Patriot ways. From what you heard, from what you cover this team every day, from what you see from Mac, what did Doug Peterson mean by those comments?
Yeah, so, Doug later said it seemed like he knew that he had more or less stepped into it. He, later said by his way of putting it, he was saying like at times he'll come up with like hand signals or verbiage that he had used in New England when it said, maybe they're trying to do something similar in Jacksonville in terms of the actual scheme and what they're trying to run. But he's just pulling up stuff from, his past couple of years. So it was interesting that he said Patriot ways specifically, but I really think, Max entered Jacksonville as a guy who, he's ready to put New England and, that experience behind him. He's not somebody who, he'll answer it when he gets asked, but he's not somebody who's openly, like pointing it out for you, up there every day. It's clear that I think he's trying to really move on to this next step of his career and get past whatever happened in New England.
Yeah, after going from a Pro Bowl alternate his rookie season to 2022's failed experiment with Matt Patricia and Joe Judge, to 2023 just looked like a broken piece, like forgot how to play football. I don't blame him for wanting to put that behind him. Is Doug Peterson that kind of coach that is calculated with what he says in the media and a guy that's been around football forever, been around great coaches like Andy Reid? He probably misspoke, but he wouldn't, intentionally go to dog on the Patriots and take a dig at another franchise?
Yeah, no, 100%. Doug's very, I've said it before, he's helped the Jaguars kind of become a grown-up franchise. They went from being, everybody's little brother who they could beat up on to he's helped the Jaguars kind of mature and get past some of their ways. I definitely think it was just something that in the immediate aftermath of the game, and, we don't know the entire content. Like, there's probably something that happened in that preseason finale where Mac, completely screwed up a call or something, brought back something from New England. But I definitely anticipate Doug being that way. And Doug's somebody who, he's always a coach who shows a lot of respect, to the opposing teams, opposing coaches. And he's somebody who he also understands the importance and the role of a backup quarterback. I mean, he was a backup quarterback himself. He developed backup quarterbacks. Nick Foles, obviously, a lot of success. So I think he understands from all the different angles, kind of how to approach Mac.
Yeah, and that's what we know him as, a QB whisperer. Now, Mac obviously was acquired by the Jaguars. Do you see him as a long-term backup piece for Trevor Lawrence, especially after T-Law signed that extension? Or do you think Mac could be a guy that they get him in, they fix him, they get him back to being a serviceable starting-level quarterback and could maybe be a trade piece down the line for a team that made moves this offseason to get closer and back into the playoffs, but maybe if they need something to push him over the top?
I really think that's their hope with Mac. It's, twofold. One, they saw what happened last year when Trevor was banged up. Their best option a lot of weeks was an injured Trevor Lawrence starting the game just because they didn't have that backup option behind him. CJ Beathard obviously had a great relationship with Lawrence, but he just, he wasn't somebody who main teams are rolling out there as a starter on, many given Sundays. So I think that was part of it. And also think, maybe they help Mac out. Mac helps them out. Say Mac signs with a quarterback needy team in free agency next year. The parameters to get a compensatory pick for quarterbacks are relatively low. He wouldn't need to sign a major deal at all. So it could be, in my opinion, some long-term planning like that. I don't expect him to be in Jacksonville long. That's not my expectation.
Hey, they traded just a 6th round pick in order to get a good backup quarterback. And again, you said if he signs somewhere else, compensatory pick in return. If that gets him a 5th rounder or better, that's just good, smart business by the Jaguars. All right, enough talking with the backup quarterback. Let's talk Trevor Lawrence. We know he signed that 5-year, $275 million extension this offseason. A lot of people mocked him. I say 2021 was a lost year because of Urban Meyer. 2023 was a tough year because of how banged up the offensive line was and how injured Trevor Lawrence was, as you mentioned, and what he had to play through. But what's the belief behind him in that building in Jacksonville?
Oh, it's as high as I think it's been really since I've covered him. I've covered the entirety of Trevor's career so far. I really think that they feel he's in a good place right now. He had one of his better training camps. He didn't play much in the preseason, but when he did, I think they scored on like 4 or 5 drives, something like that. So he at least showed, that he's in command and he's ready, I think, physically, athletically, whatever you want to call it, to take the leap on the field. It's just he has to do the little things. He has to make sure to keep himself safe. I think that's probably the biggest lesson he had to learn last year is, like you're the franchise quarterback. Maybe don't, put your shoulder down and try to get an extra yard when you're going out of bounds. Maybe don't try to, elongate this play. Try to protect yourself because there are a lot of jobs and a lot of people's livelihoods that rely on him. And I think that's probably the biggest lesson he had to learn coming into this year. But there's a lot of positivity surrounding him, and a lot of people internally feel like he's about to have a really good season.
What have you seen? You said you covered him his whole career. We know 2021 where it was one of the most toxic, worst cultures you could be in of what Urban Meyer did to that franchise. And that was his rookie season. Now getting into his 4th year into the league, 4th year as a starter, of course, for this team. How have you seen Trevor Lawrence come along as a leader, of course, being a quarterback, but also just overall as a professional athlete that has to take on more than just being the guy under center, but the guy in the building, especially once you get a contract like that?
Yeah, no, I think I've definitely seen Lawrence become much more vocal over the years. His rookie year, I think even if you're a quarterback, most rookies kind of accept it's, kind of speak when you're spoken to kind of thing. But there were a lot of times where, Urban Meyer would, put his foot in his mouth, do something, and the rookie 21-year-old quarterback was the one answering questions about it at the podium. So I think that helped him grow a lot that year. And over the years, I think you've seen him become more of a vocal leader on the field. He's not like a super, out loud, bombacious guy, on the offset personality wise, but you will see him get more, intense, correcting guys, really telling them how to elevate their play. And then just as a player, I think, he came into the league with a ton of physical tools, all the traits that you want, but there wasn't a lot of fine tuning. He has said, he didn't even take a single snap under center at Clemson. So he had to relearn a lot of things about the quarterback position. I think you've just seen him become a more refined, more efficient passer over the years.
Yeah, efficient, loves to take the deep shot down the field. And I love that gets into the new weapons he has. We know that they bring in Gabe Davis, signed him over from Buffalo. Big, athletic guy, good downfield target. But really the one is Brian Thomas Jr., the rookie out of LSU. What does the addition of those 2 receivers on the outside for a quarterback that loves to take deep shots down the field, what do they do to help enhance and improve Trevor Lawrence's game?
Yeah, no, I mean, if you break down Trevor Lawrence by the numbers, he's been at his best the last couple of years when pushing the ball downfield. The thing is, Jacksonville has not had many vertical threats with Trevor Lawrence on the roster. His rookie year, he had DJ Chark for like 4 games before he got hurt, and then he was chucking up, deep balls to Laquan Treadwell and Tavon Austin. His next year, Zay Jones and Marvin Jones. No team was really looking at them as a number 1 vertical threat. And then last year, Calvin Ridley kind of got miscast as that vertical threat. He has the speed to beat defenses deep, but he's just not the person you want stretching the field every play. I really think Brian Thomas is the best pure vertical threat, deep guy that Trevor Lawrence has had skill set wise in his career with the Jaguars. I think they fit together perfectly because Trevor, at his core, is a big arm quarterback who wants to push the ball downfield. And Thomas showed a lot in training camp. He had a little bit of a slow start the first couple of weeks, but it seemed like all it took was for him to make one play in training camp, and then he just started stacking days, stacking performances. It really looks like they're going to be a good combination moving forward.
And what is the expectation, too, from an Evan Ingram, a Travis Etienne, those guys that add a lot in the pass game, but, of course, this offense overall as well?
Yeah, no, I think Ingram, it wouldn't surprise me if Ingram was still top 2 in targets along with Christian Kirk, just because he has such great chemistry with Trevor Lawrence. I mean, you saw him catch 2 touchdown passes in the preseason finale. I mean, it's for a reason. He was probably the most targeted player by Trevor Lawrence in training camp this year. This is now their third year together. And Etienne, I think the Jaguars are expecting an even bigger year out of him this year. He hit over 1,000 yards last year. He had good touchdown numbers, but his yards per carry was below, the usual people are looking for, at least 4 yards. He was at, I believe, 3.8. So they want to see a little more efficiency. They hope that comes from the blocking. And they think he can take a big role as a pass catcher this year as well.
Is there belief in the offensive line? I mean, we talked about the quarterback. We talked about all his weapons. But end of the day, if Trevor Lawrence isn't upright and healthy, this team isn't going to go where they want to. Is there belief in the offensive line, the 5 guys they have up front right now, that they can make it through the season, keep him healthy, and as you just mentioned, too, even get the run game going, which will help out T-Law and his receivers as well?
Yeah, so internally it still feels like they kind of have to prove it to everybody else. Look at the Week 18 starting offensive line against the Titans. 4 of the 5 guys from that team are returning to start on this year's offensive line. The only difference is they benched former third-round pick Luke Fortner. They brought in Mitch Morse from the Buffalo Bills. It's definitely an offensive line that has potential. It should have a raised floor from what we saw last year, but the Jaguars are banking on a lot of things. They're specifically banking on guys to stay healthy. That was a big issue for them last year, and they haven't really done much to upgrade the offensive line depth. So their starters should be, fine, but if there's one injury to it, it could be a unit that comes down pretty quickly.
And finally, let's get into some defense, John, on this one. The underrated addition for them this offseason, in my opinion, was Eric Armstead. Sign him. That's a good interior pass rusher to complement Josh Allen and Trayvon Walker, who were great on the edge as rushers last season. What does that addition of Eric Armstead do for this defensive line to improve? And, of course, you get it up front, you win the line of scrimmage. It helps out everything that happens behind them on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, no, I mean, Trayvon Walker and Josh Allen last year, 27.5 combined sacks. They were a terror last year, but beyond them, the Jaguars just didn't get much pass rush production, especially the interior. You look at stuff like pass rush win rate and pressure rate. That most of their defense tackles were in the very bottom, tier of qualifying defensive tackles. So I think that's somewhere Armstead's going to be asked to help a lot, is the interior pass rush. And then Armstead's also somebody who they've talked about him even playing some defensive end, moving him up and down the formation. Trayvon Walker, when he was coming out of Georgia, the big thing with him was positional versatility. This is a guy who can win inside and outside. He hasn't lined up much inside in Jacksonville. So now having Armstead, have the potential to move Walker a little bit more, maybe a little bit more like he was always designed to.
Yeah, looking at Trayvon Walker, Josh Allen's numbers, a combined 93 hurries they had together last season. It's all about getting to the quarterback. Obviously, you want to sack him, but speeding him up and speeding up that offense. John, what do you think is the realistic ceiling for this Jaguars team?
I think 10-7. I think if everything breaks right, they're a 10-7 team. They're entering the playoffs in some fashion, but they do have a tough first month of the season. They play 4 teams that are in the playoffs in the first 4 games. They do get a little bit of a break. They play some inexperienced quarterbacks, some rookie quarterbacks throughout the season, but just with how tough the AFC is and the AFC South in general, I think a 10-win season is probably the best possible outcome.